A mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing. I wonder if Martin Luther would have still written these words if he had known the amount of bloodshed that was to continue to come in the name of his God, continuing from the very year of his death and onward for nearly another 500 years. My name is Rogan, and you are watching The Mysterious Stoner in a Bowler. In this final presentation, I will share with you the final bringing down of the theocracy of Christianity and Catholicism. If you're not familiar with what theocracy is, don't worry, I just learned that word today myself. A theocracy is a government that is ran by the basis of a specific religion. And that is what the Roman Empire was for a very long time. In the previous video, we discussed the persecutions that Catholicism/Christianity caused upon other nations, upon other forms of belief. In the video before that, we talked about the similarities between Christianity and the other beliefs of its day, and the other older beliefs that Christianity had to have gotten its ideas from, as practically all of the teachings of Christianity, maybe not 100%, but the vast majority, the primary gist of what builds the foundation and beliefs of Christianity are all pulled from other religions and into one. But now returning to today's topic, the final straw in the theocracy of Christianity. Catholicism did not succeed at keeping other Christian groups from popping up. There were probably some hidden Christian groups before. There have always been multiple groups of Christianity. I've discussed that in some of the other videos in this mini-series, of how they've constantly been having rifts and splits, and one of the biggest ones in recorded church history and public history is that of the Reformation of Martin Luther. He was a huge part in practically tearing off a chunk of Catholicism and creating a whole new, well, not a whole new, obviously, but a new branch. I was about to say new religion. A whole new branch of Christianity called Lutheranism. I don't know if he named it that or if his followers named it that, but his beliefs took off pretty huge. And he died in 1546, but he was so successful that there were a number of princes within the Roman Empire of his days that had converted to his style of beliefs. And out of fear of being attacked, these Lutheran princes, honestly, the Lutheran princes were the first ones afraid of being attacked because it was the Catholics or the Catholic Church that was going out and attacking other groups. And so the Lutheran princes decided to have a collective army to be able to defend each other in case the Catholic Church, Roman Empire, decided to come after them. But the Catholic Church thought they were building that army to attack them, so they decided to be to take the initiative and attack first. Whether or not who was going to attack who, it doesn't matter who was intending to be first. The Roman Empire, the Catholic Church, attacked first and started the Schmalchaldic War of 1546. A war between Catholics and Lutherans. And the Catholic Church won. And when they won, they returned all of the territories that they had conquered of the Lutherans to being enforced under Catholicism. And there continued to be a number of conflicts between different sects of Christianity, between Lutheranism and Catholicism, and Calvinism came about around the same time as Lutheranism, or might have been a little bit later, but it was roughly around the same era. And then Protestantism became a thing, and then Puritanism way later on. Obviously, I'm not going to go over every conflict in history that has gone on between these religious groups, but one of the next biggest ones, one of the most famous ones ever known between Catholics and specifically Protestants, happened in 1572, St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. It lasted for 2 months. And the casualties, they were never able to figure out how many people actually died. But they figured the Protestant casualties ranged somewhere between 10 to 70,000. But what was the real deciding factor of what kicked out Catholicism and ultimately just religion from the vast majority of the world's governments? Religion used to be such a huge thing, even on a national level, and now there are only 7 countries in the world that are governed by religion. So what happened? What was the big deal that ended it all? Well, you remember, if you saw my previous video, you will, there was a 30-year-long war started by Charlemagne between him and the pagan Saxons of the Germanic lands, because he was trying to convert them. Well, another war occurred, another 30-year-long war. This one between the Catholics and the Protestants. (1618) is when it began. And an estimated 4.5 to 8 million people died during the time of this war. it is known as the 30-Year War. Initially, it was more so focused on religion, but over time, the religious aspects of it kind of dwindled away, and it became much more apparent that they were really only concerned about control and power of the lands. And by the end, religions weren't really that big of a deal by the end of this war. But that was what the whole kicker of this war had been, was Catholics versus Protestants. And it had gone on for 30 years. Fortunately, this inspired people to start to think a little bit more outside the box. You know, maybe God isn't really involved like we think we are. Like, maybe religion and government is really just another excuse for people to be greedy. And I'm not saying this about on an individual personal level. This is government-wise. Maybe it's just another temptation and another excuse for people to use as a reason to try and manipulate and control each other. Because the bad people who are out there, the corrupt people, always will use religion for that purpose, no matter how good that religion may be in original intent. You can twist anything. When the 30-Year War ended in 1649, the very next year, 1650, going on all the way to, well, up to 1800, it's debatable, of course, but up to that whole time period of 1650 to 1800 is what is called in history the Age of Enlightenment, and is when religion started being not repressed necessarily, though some of it was, but it was being put out of the government a bit more. Especially Catholicism, but not all at once. It was gradual. It was over time. In fact, the religious wars didn't end there, and the religious persecution did not end with the Age of Enlightenment. In fact, from 1660 to 1670, there were Catholics being persecuted by laws that were having them imprisoned for attending Catholic meetings, and there were I'm not going to get into all the things that the Catholics had to go through, because it was not nearly as much to the extent as what they put others through, but they had their own difficulties for a time. They had their own moments of being persecuted by other branches of Christianity, specifically the Protestants. Protestants seem to be the primary antagonists, or rivals, you might say, of the Catholics. That's how it seems to have become. So much so that in Ireland, there was another 30-year war between Protestants and Catholics. It wasn't strictly over religion in that case, but one side was very strongly Catholic and one side was very strongly Protestant. One side wanted to join with the UK and the other wanted to remain independent. They just happened to have the different religious sects on each side, so that just created more of a explosion. And that war occurred from 1968 to 1998. So that long after the Age of Enlightenment. The key thing that the Age of Enlightenment brought about was the beliefs of deism and atheism. Atheism being that there is no God and that humans are primarily responsible for their own morals and such, and deism from the original form of how it was originally uh, brought about to being believed originally was that there was a God who put the universe and everything into existence and then just sits back and lets everyone do their own thing. So ultimately the same conclusion to where sure you can believe in a God if you want, but it's up to us to take care of our own, to govern our own selves and govern our own people. And so those became very popular beliefs in those times. They're not religions, they're just it really simplifies life when you can take control of it for yourself and learn from your own experiences and that of others, and not just be restricted to a book that may or may not be completely true, if at all. So it's been a huge step forward in progress. But unfortunately, this has not ended all religious government manipulation and influence, and has not stopped rebellious fanatics from causing violence and organizing into violent groups. I'm sure we can all think of some countries that are run by religions and some very popular religious, I don't want to use the T word, but they're just very violent, zealous religious groups that believe in forced conversions, that everyone should believe the way they do, and that they are extremely sexist and homophobic, and they're I don't need to say who they are. We all know. If we watch the news, you know exactly who I'm referring to. It's unfortunate. But luckily, the vast majority of world governments are not run by a theocracy anymore. Only those 7 countries are governed by a religion. But fortunately, none of them are Christian or Catholic, except for one. For some reason, the Vatican City constitutes as a country. It's very small. It's not even half the size of New York Central Park. But it constitutes as a country. So there is one country left that is ruled by Catholicism. Very tiny, but as you can see, the whole rest of the world is, we're fine. And ever since, the sects of Christianity have all had to rely on whatever subtle means or publicly ethical means they can to make converts. They've had to use missionaries and whatever way ever since. No more violence allowed, hopefully. It it will stay that way. And hopefully, they will never again have government power, because we've seen how religion and government goes. So in summary, where does Christianity come from, and what is it? It is a religion with attributes copied by many older and current beliefs during its early days, popularized by an unfactual myth generated and presented to the public as truth by the government of its day, was a tool used by the same and other governments, as well as used governments itself, to control, convert, murder, and take what lands or possessions from whomever they wanted. Oh, and to save souls. All for the extent of roughly over 1,300 years before the Age of Enlightenment. Christianity is ultimately a religious government project for controlling humans that was abandoned because government leaders decided it was too destructive and divisive to be allowed to have a say in how to govern people. It doesn't have the political and worldly power it used to have, and hopefully it never will again. But it is still a religion of division, conflict, and confusion to this day. And death would be a sweet release to many who are caught up in some of the stricter sects that still exist to this day. I know because I've been there. I've witnessed and taken part in the arguments about things like head coverings, acceptable music styles, if divorced men should be allowed to be church leaders, and lots of other petty and overrated topics that have literally split churches and make new denominations on the spot. Both my father and grandfather were known for taking part in severing churches. They were faithful Christians. They were both missionaries. That's Christianity for you. The fact that this religion's God never stepped in to correct the governments or the churches proves that that God was never real. Humans gave Christianity its morals and its power. And when they realized that it wasn't working out, God could not stop the government from taking away that power from Christianity. Unfortunately, Christianity still has a significant amount of power. A lot of people still believe it. Why? Well, to tell you the truth, because they're not taught better. They don't know what I've been sharing with you. I didn't know any of this before I sat down and decided, I think a great subject for my YouTube channel would be the origin of Christianity. Because I know it, I don't even know it myself for real. That's when I started learning the real history of Christianity as a 31, I can't remember when I started writing this. I think I was still 31. been a crazy end of the year for me. You'll have to forgive me. But you see, I was never taught any of this. Most Christians are never taught any of this. Most Catholics are never taught any of this. They are taught the Constantine story and a few other things and all the nasty persecutions, and if they're Catholic, meh, meh, meh on the Protestants, and if you're Protestant or, came from that, it's meh, meh, meh on the Catholics, and it's the Lutherans are caught somewhere in the middle, and Calvinists and everyone else, because no one else completely agrees with everyone else, and that's just Christianity for you. No one agrees with anyone else. Because they're not taught the real history. If they're taught the real history, they could agree. But they've been raised to believe this light sprinkling of history. This kind of history is super embarrassing. And the Catholic and Christian leaders, well, they need their money and their cars and their mansions and their jets. I mean, what would they do without their supporters? They might have to get a real job. And ironically, Jesus says, those are the bastards that have the hardest time making it into heaven. What's really disturbing is that those wealthy priests and preachers can preach that same Bible verse to their congregations. And the people in that audience seem to never figure it out as a whole, that they're giving their money and listening to the very guy Jesus was talking about. And this confusion, this brainwashing, all this is not even scratching the surface of the power that Christianity still has today. Now, obviously, not all sects of Christianity are geared towards the same negative traits and ideals. And some, especially the newer ones, are becoming more and more accepting. Like, they're even accepting of homosexuals now. Honestly, the study that I've done doesn't line up with that concept, but whatever. Christians can make their arguments and whatnot. I don't believe in the Bible anymore. Not like that. But they are becoming more and more open, more accepting towards other people, different styles of beliefs, even of different styles of Christianity. And so they're becoming less and less like their Christian ancestors. There's still the psychological and very harmful beliefs, like the existence of sin and eternal torture. I mean, that's mental terrorism right there. Telling someone they're going to burn in hell forever. But maybe, who knows? Maybe someday those beliefs will also be dropped from Christianity. It keeps changing over time, and it seems to gradually evolve into being less and less like its toxic older self, and into being the more open and accepting way that it is always supposed to have been, the way other beliefs have been already for a very long time. And they've been teaching this in general. It's like, the new religion is finally catching up to the rest of us. Like, about time. Way to go. From having having learned that mankind's own governments saw the problems of Christianity and gave it the boot, and that modern Christians are slowly becoming ultimately better people by continuing to abandon the bad and silly beliefs of ancestral Christians, and that there's been a huge recent decrease in people believing in Christianity overall, in general. We can clearly see that mankind is slowly learning that the only authority that can truly grant order and morals to humanity is humanity itself. Whatever gods exist have never intervened before, during, or since that 1,300-year reign of imperial Christian rule to defy or support that religion. Almost as if there were any gods, their absence and lack of input and lack of miraculous intervention suggests that regardless of their opinions on how they think we ought to live, they've chosen to let humanity be responsible for itself. Otherwise, there would only be one religion. Gods or not, the evidence is staggering. Humanity is ultimately responsible for its own governing. And if our governments don't want Christianity as part of them, maybe it's time the rest of us look at the evidence and consider letting go of it too. Now, if you're a Christian and you're watching this, honestly, I've been a Christian before, but I can't say I've been in your exact shoes because I've never been in the shoes of a Christian who was presented with historical evidence. No one ever came to me with this and told me, hey, this is history. This is real world history right here that you need to see so that you can understand what the real truth is about the world, about what you believe. So, but the way I came out of Christianity was very different. So, but I was in it. I was deeply in it. I preached it. I told you, my parent, my father, my grandfather were missionaries. And I did missionary type work myself. I preached it. I played music. I wrote songs. I even wrote plays. And I did a lot in the name of God. And no one ever brought this information to me. So I want you to understand that me providing this to you is not an attack on you. It is not an attack on your personal experiences, because I understand spiritual experiences. I have had some of those myself, and I may have to, now that I've said it, I will probably need to make a video about that, maybe a couple, because science has begun to be able to articulate and describe and understand how many spiritual phenomena are working. Not all of them, but many of them, and they're getting on the course to learning more and more. It's a difficult field for them to study, but they are studying it. It's becoming a real huge thing. This isn't even about trying to prove that Jesus wasn't real or that he didn't have anything good to say. This is about the truth, about talking about what is real, what actually happened, what is truth. And to prove my sincerity of that matter, there are 3 links for you to look at below. The first one is historical, both Christian and non-Christian, historical documentation discussed of evidence of the existence of Jesus. The second link is in regards to what Jesus did between his 13th year as a child, that we hear about in the scriptures, and as an adult, what he did in the middle. Was he even in Israel? Did he really stay home and be a carpenter with his dad that whole time, like Christian tradition says? What does history actually say? And then the third link talks about one of the books that was not allowed into the Bible, the book of Mary Magdalene. And I'm not going to get into it too much, but you will find there what may be an explanation, an alternative explanation to what the resurrection actually was. And for my very final thought, I would like to leave you all with a fascinating observation that I have made between all of this and just in line with the truth. The very beginning of the Bible, God says to Adam and Eve, you can have every tree of the garden except for the tree of knowledge. And as soon as Adam and Eve eat of that tree, what does God do? He takes it away. Jesus comes along and he says, know the truth, and the truth will set you free. How can one know the truth if they do not test what they are told against the facts of reality? Truth has to line up with history. It has to line up with reality, with the way things are. You can have all kinds of knowledge, but only certain knowledge lines up with the truth. That means you have to seek for that truth. You cannot just be told what that truth is. You have to seek for that knowledge, and you have to eat of that knowledge. God said, don't eat of the tree of knowledge. Jesus said, eat. Because if you know the truth will set you free. The fruit of knowledge is in the links below. Even if you are not a Christian, even if you do not believe in a God or anything, further your knowledge. Consume more fruit. More fruit, more truth, more wisdom makes you a wiser and more whole and more balanced being. That is what I have learned. That is why I share the truth with you. The truth has made my life better. And so I continue to learn it, and I continue to share it. Until next time, my friends, stay safe and farewell.